Welcome to the Best of BTOWN 2020.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the Best of BTOWN 2020 edition. I'm your host, Bill Bartholomew. Today, we're going to count down the top 10 episodes of the podcast here in 2020. Well, on Tuesday, we counted down numbers 20 through 11. You can go back and listen to that anytime you'd like. It's the previous episode. And as I mentioned in a fairly lengthy monologue, much appreciated to you. Yeah, you out there, for all you've done to help sustain this program and broaden it. As I mentioned, we've seen growth by, in some cases, up to 850% on some platforms. Massive expansion of this program, and it's because of you. I haven't spent any money on promotion. It's been all word of mouth and organic growth, and that's something that I'm really proud of, and I hope that you understand that if you've assisted in any way by just talking about this show or sharing it on social media, whatever, you have a stake in this operation, and it's, again, much appreciated. Okay, so we have this today, the top 10 episodes of the year. Last Friday, we had a really interesting roundtable discussion with Linda Borg of the Providence Journal, WPRO's Steve Klampkin, and the one and only Jim Hummel, kind of breaking down the top news stories of 2020. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out what those were, likely, but kind of getting into the nuances of it, the coverage of those stories. So that's there for you. In addition, as I just mentioned, numbers 20 through 11 in the Best of BTOWN 2020 edition. And then we'll have this today. Next week, we'll have our holiday special, and then I'll be off for a few weeks as we get ready to bring you some brand new content with some new production, some new elements. It's really exciting, and I can't wait to deliver it to you. I'll be off, though, during the holidays and for the first couple of weeks of January, at least in terms of the podcast. I'll still be there for you on social media, btown.stream. That'll take you to the BTOWN Facebook group, and you can follow me at Bill Bartholomew on Twitter and Instagram. And on Wednesday nights, look for me on Rhode Island PBS at 7 o'clock for Rhode Island PBS Weekly. Bartholomew Town is a listener-supported program. There's a few ways that you can help out. Number one, you can share an episode on social media or by text message, word of mouth, whatever it is you'd prefer. Number two, you can leave a rating and review wherever you're listening right now, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever. And number three, if you want to go a step further, for as little as $3 per month, you can become a patron of this show. Simply head to patreon.com/BartholomewTown or click the support link wherever you're listening. For $10 per month, you become a BTOWN Insider. You'll receive exclusive monthly content, including commentary from yours truly and people like Ted Nisi, Ian Donis, and Dr. Luis Daniel Munoz. That's patreon.com/BartholomewTown. All right, here we go. The top 10 episodes of BTOWN as voted by you, the listeners, as selected by me, based, I guess, somewhat on science, looking at the hard numbers, how many people downloaded the episode, how often was the episode downloaded or streamed, in the months after it was released. I looked at a bunch of things. How big an audience did we have in a particular month? A lot of things I looked at, and of course my own opinion in compiling this top 20 of 2020. But for the number 10 slot, we go all the way back to our first episode of the year, back to January 21st, where we welcomed Mario Hilario of NBC 10 for a conversation with a Rhode Island legend.
A lot of times in this business, people have to go out far away from where they grew up or where they want to be because you have to go to a smaller market to get your experience. Well, this was getting that small market experience, but here in New England and close to home and with good news stories. I mean, Brockton's right in between, Boston, Providence. So we had a lot of good, and there was good local politics.
Sure.
There was a lot of good stuff going on, So I was able to get a tape together. Back then we actually used videotape.
Right.
And I was actually at a conference in Boston. It was the regional RTNDA. But anyway, the news director from Channel 6, ABC 6, which at the time was probably CBS, so I'm dating myself. But anyway.
Yeah, no, they did the big switch over there.
That was,
Price is Right, new home.
Yeah, exactly. That was a big deal to try to follow that, right? But the news director saw, I was in a tape critique session, and he was one of the people, and he gave me his card. He said, I like the way you wrote that, and he liked the edit. I remember specifically said, I liked your use of the natural sound of putting, I forget what it was something about, I think ironically it was a weather story, but using like the sound of the rain, in the piece and weaving it in and out, and
the audio, creating an audio,
yes,
that playing with audio, video, and narrative.
Yep, exactly. So he liked it. So I started freelancing at ABC 6, and it was kind of sporadic. It was they'd call me when they needed me, and it was pretty much only on the weekends.
Yeah.
And then an opening came up at Channel 10, so I jumped at it. Yeah.
And that was that. The rest is history.
The rest is history. Yeah, within a year.
All right, coming in at number 9, we go back to March 11th for then Newport Mayor Jamie Bova discussing the latest on the Newport St. Patrick's Day Parade. Now, the St. Patrick's Day Parade is a huge event in the city. It attracts thousands and thousands of people from all over the region. And this year, it took place right after the emergence of COVID-19 here in the Ocean State. And what was specific about this episode and this moment in time, there was this wild back and forth, this wild indecisiveness as to whether or not the parade should be canceled or go on as planned. You know, at one moment it was on, then suddenly it was canceled, then the next moment it was on, and then ultimately it was canceled. And the mayor expressing here in this interview that indecisiveness came from pressure from the business sector, came from the economic factors, if you will, of canceling the parade versus what she says was a lack of guidance from the Department of Health in terms of what to do about such an event. Now, we all know, looking back on it, this was a no-brainer. The event should have been canceled immediately and stayed as such. In the moment, though, I guess, you know, you think about it, COVID was still something new. It was still emerging as a great unknown, particularly here in the United States and particularly in Rhode Island. But coming in at number 9, Mayor Jamie Bova, then Mayor Jamie Bova, I should say, and the indecisiveness around what to do about the Newport St. Patrick's Day. It's the best of BTOWN 2020.
I know that this is a celebratory day usually, but we also have to think longer term about our health and the safety of our community, and that so I would urge folks to be aware of the guidance and to follow it as best they can.
But as mayor of Newport, what's your message to businesses that are planning on hosting parties that are going to have large amounts of people? Are you offering any sort of guidance at the mayoral level on to the entire community?
So I again want to make sure that you and everyone understands this is a city council. Everything we do in the city of Newport is done on a city council level. And what I am doing is, as an individual councilor, as the council chair, I am urging people to, and this is when I say people, it's residents and businesses, it's follow the direction of the Department of Health and understand that it might be inconvenient and it might be difficult, but large gatherings are not something that we should be having right now. And we will be continuing as a city to work with the Chamber of Commerce to understand potential impacts on the businesses and on the city of Newport as a whole, and understand what we can do to try to help them. But that is, I can't, I'm not going to, what I'm trying to do right now is urge people to listen to the Department of Health, recognize that they are going to have to make the inconvenient and difficult choice to cancel events, and listen to the fact that we are being told that large groups are a non-starter and that we have to take our health and safety seriously.
One last question. So just on a procedural level, you basically are saying that until you received a position, I suppose, from the governor's office today, that you, in your capacity as mayor, which again may be a bully pulpit capacity, maybe just a media relations capacity, or simply in your role on the council, that the governor's statement today alone shifted your position from voting for having the parade to now you're saying that small businesses shouldn't gather
on behalf of the Department of Health. So what we were wanting, what I was wanting and needing was direction from the Department of Health. I rely on experts in the Department of Health to help us make decisions that are related to public health and safety. And the guidance from the Department of Health had not been there until today. We needed guidance, and we got it today and not yesterday.
All right, coming in at number 8, we circle back to March 31st for a conversation with the executive producer of the Newport Folk and Jazz Festivals, Jay Sweet. Now, at the time, it was pretty unclear whether or not such events would be able to take place here in Rhode Island or anywhere really in the country or the world even for that matter. Obviously, the events were canceled. It still remains somewhat unknown whether they will take place in 2021, but here's hoping they're a huge economic boost to the state and the city of Newport, and of course, culturally speaking, some of the most exciting events that take place on an annual basis. A lot of tradition there, and it's a major attraction. But number 8 on the Best of BTOWN 2020, a conversation with Jay Sweet.
I had seen South by Southwest, it was canceled. And when that happened, we were in the middle of doing one of our artist gives when we announce an artist and we then pick a program with that artist and make a donation in their name to a music education or a music program, usually with where they're from or someplace where they now live. That means something to them in their local community. And I had a phone call with our old friend, Maddie Vasquez from Delta Spirit and Glorietta. And I said, hey, is there a program you want me to give to? And he said, actually, I'm in a very weird position where there's a bunch of artists in need here in Austin because of the cancellation of South by Southwest. And there's a pop-up COVID relief fund happening in Austin. I know it's not a music program, but they're helping musicians. Do you mind if we put our attention towards that? I was like, of course. Mm-hmm. And then that one moment, and then I was having an exchange with James and Kim Taylor, and they had just given that $1 million. I don't know if you saw that to the Massachusetts health system to help try to fight this. And I wrote him a nice note and just said, that's incredibly kind. And then I had heard from Jackson Brown that he was infected. And then I just said, well, I was getting these heart-wrenching stories from friends and family of the festivals, folk and jazz. And it wasn't rocket science to realize that maybe reallocating some of our funds to programs that actually can't use the money right now. That sounds horrible because there is no school for music education.
Right.
And we are still helping those communities. If they're doing online education and stuff, but some of these were just built on, we go into schools and we do this, right? So I just said, listen, if we can reallocate some of this to help, this, hopefully I'd love to get back to our regular scheduled programming on giving to music education and music funding. But at this point, if you hear some of the heart-wrenching stories that I hear on a now minute by minute basis, emails are coming in. I mean, these aren't, hey man, I couldn't tour and now I really, really love some cash. This is, I'm trying to figure out how to apply for food stamps. I'm thinking of having to live in my van because rent is too much. And that's just tough, man.
Coming in at number 7, we welcome back to BTOWN, United States Congressman from Rhode Island, David Cicilline. On a statewide basis, it was certainly an issue, but we started to really understand, I don't know when exactly it was, sometime at the beginning of April, that specific zip codes, specific commonalities of, frankly, social injustice and inequity were presenting more challenges when it came to COVID-19. Some of those are obviously in the housing and access to education, access to medicine. And some of them are just, you can go back 400 years or more and trace the roots of where that divide has come from. Looking at Rhode Island, looking at your congressional district, what would you like to see change, I guess, immediately to sort of move the needle where that inequity can be at least reduced right now and eventually made complete history?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the things that we did in the HEROES Act, part of the challenge here is that, communities of color have disproportionately been impacted in part because they have greater challenges in accessing healthcare, greater challenges in accessing jobs that provide health coverage. When they do have healthcare, they may not be in a position to follow through with prescriptions or other things that are necessary to maintain health. Very often in poor communities, people are living in more confined quarters, obviously, families congregating in very small spaces, all those conditions which a highly contagious virus can take full advantage of. So those are hard things to fix immediately, but we need to recognize that housing remains a real issue in our state for many, many families. We need to recognize, although we have virtually universal coverage in Rhode Island, there are still people in Rhode Island who don't have access to healthcare. We need to make sure everyone does. We need to make certain that people have access to current and good information from public health officials how to protect themselves and their families.
All right, number 6. This is an interesting one, and I was almost hesitant to include this because it really wasn't even intended to be a podcast episode when I recorded this. But look, I'm a member of the governor's media corps. I've been in, 120-something press briefings related to COVID-19 this year. And after a recent press briefing in which she announced that the state of Rhode Island was going on pause, there were a few things that struck me as being left out. Worker protections, triaging for small businesses, and frankly, just a more aggressive plan. And so I went to my van and went on Facebook Live and just kind of gave this rant. I'd been recapping what had happened inside the governor's presser for, a couple of months or something like that. And it usually been sort of like a relaxed, haha, here's what's going on, and sort of trying to lightheartedly deliver the details in this really dark situation, right, with COVID-19. But we go back now to November 20th for this bonus episode as it was listed. The audio from my Facebook video, and I put it in here because, to be honest with you, this one went nuclear. It got a ton of listens and it got a ton of shares, not only here, but also over on the social media side on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and whatnot. It just took off. So coming in at number 6, my thoughts on new COVID-19 restrictions from my van.
Money's king, yes. Absolutely, Lauren. Lauren writes, it's clear money's king. Well, yeah. You know why? Because we have one political party in this country, the business party. 2 factions, the Republicans and the Democrats. There's a lot of major differences, but that's what's happening here. But the fact that they came out there today and they did not shut this down, when we've got 600, 700, 800, 1,000 people a day who are testing positive, all the while, these test results coming back in with significant delays, contact tracing has completely fallen apart. We got people saying in schools, we've got people in all kinds of environments saying that they've never heard from the Department of Health. And again, I understand they're overwhelmed. We all get it. But the response should be to immediately pause or lockdown, whatever terminology. Come up with a better word than lockdown if it's about that. But that was aggravating because the governor is easily one of the smartest people that I've ever met. And she knows. You can read body language. We can all do it. She knows how dangerous this is. And to mention Black Friday and to mention Twin River and to not shut that nonsense down right now, that tells you all you need to know.
You're listening to the Best of BTOWN 2020 edition. I'm your host, Bill Bartholomew. Here we go into the top 5. We're off. Coming in at number 5, a conversation with outgoing Speaker of the House, Nick Mattiello, who expressed his confidence in his race against Barbara Ann Fenton-Fung, the Republican who ultimately defeated him handily in District 15.
This year, you're going to see us getting back to normal numbers, I believe. I think this year, we're probably going to go back to numbers pre-2016. That's my guess. And my opponent will say otherwise. I'll say that, and I respect that. So I try not to talk to too much about where the district is, and I leave it for the voters to speak on behalf of where they are. But speaking to my neighbors, speaking to friends, speaking to business centers in the community, I'm getting a very, very solid and clear message that we're in very solid shape this election cycle.
Are you concerned about the impact that the Jeff Britt trial is going to have on this race?
No, thank you for the question. I'm sure that some people want that to be the case. What I would say is I'm glad I got the chance to finally say something publicly in my testimony about it. If you've noticed, my testimony was totally irrelevant to the matter before the court relative to Jeff Britt's actions. It was clear for the third time that I had absolutely nothing to do with it. In fact, no knowledge of it.
Coming in at number 4, we flash back to June, the morning after the riot that took place at the Providence Place Mall. Now, this was sort of hodgepodged into the action that was taking place all around the country, really, but particularly here in Rhode Island in the wake of the George Floyd incident. However, it was kind of revealed to be just sort of a miscellaneous riot You know what I mean? A lot of just random bad actors. And in many ways, it kind of did more harm to the broad social justice movement than any good. So this is a conversation we had just hours after that riot with the Nonviolence Institute's Sal Montero and Providence College's Keith Morton. Number 4 here on the Best of BTOWN 2020.
So when I see what happened last night, first off, from what the information that I'm receiving from the people that were there, people from the Institute that were there, a lot of those people were from out of state. They weren't actually Providence youth and people. It hurts. It bothers me that it's come to this, but I don't think I just, there's a lot to it. It's years and generations of not being heard. It's anger. It's the voiceless, as Martin Luther King says, it's the voice of the people that not being heard. So it is heard because I love Providence, and I think Providence is one of the best cities. Our relationship with the police, this wasn't called for. This was something else, I think. This had nothing to do with the message of George Floyd. I think this was just almost like a bandwagon type thing. Like, hey, everybody else is doing it, so let us do it. Right. So I don't think it was really, the intent was genuine.
Rhode Island voters ultimately decided to remove Providence Plantations from the state's official name through a ballot referendum question this past November. But there was a lot of conversation, even some pushback surrounding that particular issue all throughout the summer. You think back, Mayor Elorza was the first to drop it from all city documents. Then, a day later or so, Governor Raimondo holding a press conference at Billy Taylor Park to do the same with respect to statewide documents and so forth. But it wasn't until the voters made that decision this past November that the state officially moved to remove Providence Plantations from the state's name. Back in June, I had a conversation with State Representative Marcia Ranglin-Vassell that was a really powerful discussion on why this particular issue meant so much to so many people here in our state. And it's number 3 on the Best of BTOWN 2020.
But, all I can say is people's actions and their words have to match. If they don't match, it doesn't mean anything. I am hopeful because I can feel the shift. I am seeing disruptors joining us with this movement. But I know that structural racism, structural poverty, systematic racism is laced in the DNA of this country. It is. So it's going to take a lot. But I believe in humanity. I believe in the goodness of people. And I also believe in the goodness of people to change. But we cannot stop. We cannot stop. We cannot rest on our laurels. We cannot become complacent. And we must hold people accountable as we hold ourselves accountable. So we heard the COVID data, the sad, the awful. I have lost people that I know to COVID. You might know people. I've lost people right here in my district to COVID. Those numbers are not just numbers. Those numbers are real people. They're people that I know. They're people that you know. And it pained me a lot.
Okay, coming in at number 2 here on the Best of BTOWN 2020. This one went absolutely nuclear, got a ton of listens, a ton of shares, and it was a powerful, powerful episode with someone who's a familiar voice to this program and throughout the state in general. Ray Two Hawks Watson, a conversation on everything social justice, everything with respect to making amends and addressing history and correcting this false narrative that by making corrections to history, you're somehow erasing history. It was a powerful conversation. It remains as such, and it's number 2 here on the Best of BTOWN 2020.
Because the more I speak to especially older generation Rhode Islanders, I realized a lot of them have bought into this narrative that Rhode Island was always this fantastic place where people came for freedom and democracy and to believe what they wanted. And yet I was part of it, but there was also a lot of very negative things that were going on. Let's take the name plantations for a second. I keep hearing this story, plantations, that was just farming, that was the original colony. And I'm like, yeah, all that's great and dandy. But who was working on those farms? And it was American Indians. After the King Philip's War, they either got enslaved or forcibly indentured onto these plantations. And this is why a lot of the Indians around here, most of them have English names. Because how do you go from Canonicus, Humham, Sokanoniko, Magnus, Akupatanuit, Canonchet to my I don't know how many great-grandfathers, but the Reverend Samuel Niles? How do you do that? Well, your people are stuck on someone's plantation. They're given the last name of that person who owns the plantation so that everyone knows whose Indians you are. And then you're told, if you Christianize, if you civilize, then perhaps there'll be more opportunities for you. So when we try to just sanitize our history, we erase the experiences of an entire population that's still here. And it allows us to sit in this false sense of pride about ourselves when we should really be reflecting upon the fact that, hey, that was a terrible time period.
Okay, folks, well, here we are. We made it to number 1 in the Best of BTOWN 2020 edition. Before we reveal that episode, I just want to, again, thank all of you for letting me into your world. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve you with this content, the opinion, the journalism, the analysis, the entertainment, whatever you want to call it, whatever BTOWN means to you. Well, I appreciate it very much. Okay, coming in at number 1, one of our nation's leading medical voices right here in Rhode Island. She's with Brown University and Rhode Island Hospital, and she takes the number 1 spot on the Best of BTOWN 2020, Dr. Megan Ranney. How has this changed you as a medical professional, as a scientist? Let's say going forward the next period of your life, what's the biggest difference you're going to feel or approach, how your difference in approach to your job? What's shaken things up the most?
I mean, my gosh, Bill, what hasn't gotten shaken up over the last 7 months? I feel, if you had told me a year and a half ago that I was going to be spending a significant portion of my time fighting a global viral pandemic, I would have laughed at you. Normally, my work is around injury and mental health and the use of technology to identify and prevent those. But I think that, where I see that this has changed me is that it has doubled down on my commitment to effective science communication and to my commitment to community innovation and my commitment to public-private partnership. Those are the things that I have seen have made a difference.
The Bartholomew Town Podcast.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.